Hi, Colin.
Hello, Sai. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm good.
Firstly,
Happy
thank you.
Wednesday.
Happy
Wednesday night
Wednesday.
for you.
Yeah, Wednesday night for me, Wednesday morning for you.
Yeah, yeah. Talking across the world. This is great.
Thank you. Thank you. Firstly, thank you very much for accepting my invitation and accepting to be on my show.
Yeah, my pleasure. Glad to chat with you today. Thanks for asking me to do it.
So I've gone through your profile. I can see you have done a lot of work and you have done a lot of service uh, in different ages of yours. So I thought to tell about your work to my audience.
Cool. Yeah, I've been working for a while. Graduated from college in 2001, and I've spent most of those years working in tech marketing kind of businesses. Spent some time at Microsoft um, as a contractor and then as an FTE. And then it's been mostly consulting since then. A big chunk of it was 5 years at Amazon with AWS. And then since then, I've been back to Microsoft for a while. Did a couple of different consulting gigs there, one on the partner team and one with the Bing and Edge team. And then for the last couple of years, until recently, I've been working at a company called Sound United, and they own a lot of audio equipment brands. Marantz, Denon, Bowers and Wilkins, and Polk are some of their brands. Excuse me. And doing all data stuff, data and marketing. Um, So like kind of to trace back through those, like at Microsoft I was like the data guy on the marketing team for one of their hardware business. So PC input devices, mice and keyboards, webcams, that kind of stuff. And was one of the main data guys on that team. And so, we did a lot of, market share reporting, and analysis of our categories. Um, and then in the Amazon time, I kind of stretched outside of just data stuff and did some marketing operations, marketing kind of project management of driving some campaigns for the AWS cloud Windows business. They sell a lot of Windows and SQL, and so kind of was pretty much everything marketing wise for that small slice of the business. Small relative to the total of all the stuff AWS is doing, but it was like while I was there grew to be $1 billion business. So it was a decently sized business. And because they sell a lot of Windows and SQL, Microsoft had a program where they would invest in companies that sold their products, and you could use that money to do marketing stuff. And so basically I was project managing the use of that budget and doing all sorts of different activities. A lot of mostly digital marketing, but also some traditional marketing, some in-person events, doing different sponsorships or booths, and then like some out of home, like airport ads. But a lot of it, our bread and butter was webinars. And so we do a technical webinar, on, like how to set up SharePoint on your AWS cloud. And so they'd have a solution architect engineer, at Amazon who would write a white paper about that and make what they call reference architecture. Basically kind of a tutorial on how companies can set up that kind of thing. So if they want to run SharePoint or they want to do SQL Server or porting services or any of that stuff, they could run that in the Amazon cloud. And so this was kind of in the early cloud days. This was like 2011, 12, through about 15 I was there. Um, and so at that time, Azure hadn't taken off as much. AWS was really kind of the first one to make the cloud work as a business. And And so that was part of the motivation for Microsoft to invest in that. They had a lot of their customers using AWS cloud to do that. And, but they were running it on Amazon. And so, that was that experience there. That was good to kind of branch out beyond just data stuff, but really at the heart, I'm kind of a data guy. I like to say I've made a whole career out of spreadsheets, which is really true in a way, but also I've kind of used that as like a starting point to then learn other skills that plug into that. And so like SQL is kind of the biggest one, but also just automating within Excel itself. They have VBA is Visual Basic for applications. It's a little bit of kind of becoming the dated, older way to do it. Now they have a JavaScript framework that you can use to do the same thing, but essentially it's the same thing of like just writing code to do stuff in spreadsheets, and just for all sorts of variety of like data cleanup, or even like at my most recent job, one of the things that I wrote a macro for was we were doing office hours. I was on the BI team within an IT team. Most of my experience is like marketing, but I'm comfortable kind of working in IT too, and, doing like tickets and Scrum and, Jira and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, we were doing office hours. We had our BI office hours. We had our set of Power BI reports was kind of our main output. It's always spreadsheets involved too, but, we were doing weekly office hours for that, and we need to schedule coverage for that. We had 4 people on the team, and we just needed 2 to cover each office hour. And so we just had a rotating schedule. So that's kind of redundant to create all these Outlook calendar invites. And so I wanted to automate that. And so I made a macro where you just have your list in Excel and for the different days and who's covering those days. And then you would just run that macro and it would create those calendar invites that would go onto our shared calendar so we could keep track. So just little stuff like that, like kind of boring tasks, that you can get the computer to do for you. That's kind of always my goal of like the dream of if I could just reduce my whole job down to one button, or like one process to run. It's always, you never get quite that far, but it's always kind of the dream of automating your work. And then you can create, free up time to do better analysis or finding more insights or, different projects, automating other stuff. And it's always just kind of, you're just chasing that kind of, just delegating the work to the computer, so, that's kind of in a nutshell, my career. I've actually in March, unfortunately, my job with Sound United got eliminated. So I'm actually looking for my next role right now. I have something in the works, but it's not final yet. So they haven't made an offer yet. But hopefully that'll come through. So we'll see. But, kind of more similar to some of the stuff I've been doing. Yeah, I'm excited about that. I think even though it was kind of, a setback to have to look for a new job, that job had kind of changed since I had started it a little bit. It was fully remote when we started. And then the company actually got bought. Sound United was acquired by a company called Massimo, who makes, hospital equipment, health equipment. And, they purchased our company, and, they used to be just like a B2B business, Massimo, selling to hospitals. But they were going consumer. They wanted to go direct to consumer, with their products. More people are, especially kind of with COVID, more people are kind of taking a more active role in managing their own healthcare, or, there's kind of like a lot of talk, especially in the States here, about the aging baby boomer population. The folks of that age, like my parents' age, are kind of, getting older these days. And so, some of Massimo's products are to be able to help manage that electronically. And so you can keep an eye on some of the, like when you're in the hospital and they have, they're checking like your O2 oxygen level, that kind of stuff. You can, with Massimo's products, you can do that kind of stuff at home. And so some of the monitoring that you can get in the hospital, you can do at home, and you can also do it remotely. And so that's their business, and where they were looking to grow is to add that direct to consumer. At Sound United, we have that direct business. All of our brand, well, I say our, like it's us, it's not me anymore, but you understand. They have that. There's a website for each of the different brands, and we have the relationships and the process around working with the different retailers and getting product to distributors and getting it on the shelf in Best Buy, or wherever they're offered. And so Massimo's looking to add that capability, so they purchased Sound United, and then kind of things continued normally as we were doing. They said just kind of keep doing what you're doing, but over time there got to be a little more kind of budget pressure on the team, and they made the choice of eliminating that role. So again, kind of surprising disappointment in my career, but I've got some good valuable skills and confident I'll land on my feet. And like I said, I think I've found that next thing, but we'll see how it goes. Hopefully they pick me. But we had a good interview yesterday, and but in the meantime, I've been focusing on always looking to build my skills. There's always kind of a next step to take. For me in particular, like being a data analyst, I really want to take that leap to like data science and kind of go that next step. And I've touched some of that stuff, like I've done some simple linear regression, for example, trying to fit a line to a data set. But of course it goes beyond just linear. You've got logarithmic and various kind of different curves that you can try to fit to, but I haven't quite kind of gotten into that. So that's like an area that I look to develop, as well as another example, like using machine learning to find insights. If you can use automation to find what you're looking for in the data, or find interesting anomalies or things to kind of dig into, just kind of going further up that stack of like, okay, we can produce the reports or produce the data with code. We can automate that pretty well, but then can we take it to the next level and actually like read through stuff and pick out what's important, based on that. Or lots of other opportunities too, like data management is something that has a lot of room for automating, again, looking for anomalies. Or something in my Sound United role was part of my focus was data management. And that was a particular challenge there because they have a number of different brands, but also that company had grown through acquisition over the years. And so, it was like Marantz and Definitive, and then they bought Polk, and then they bought Bowers and Wilkins, and added these different brands that had been different companies before that. And so they had different systems that were running that. There were 5 different ERPs kind of running the operations behind the scene, and that was kind of our key data source that we were pulling in. So getting the data to match across those different things, you can imagine, like it was kind of a big task, but it was a good thing, to learn about, and something that, in my experience is the kind of thing where like I hadn't realized that I had aspects of my prior roles that was data management. I just didn't think of it in those kind of formalized terms. But, there's entire books and classes and stuff and like focuses you can do where it's just focusing on data management. Like it's whole own discipline, but just basically it's making sure stuff matches and making sure stuff's right. It's like, especially for an example, like we would buy data to have data on the whole marketplace. Like obviously internally we know all our own stuff, but you really want to see how you do against the competition too. And so there's a couple of main companies that provide that data. NPD in the US and GfK is kind of covers the rest of the world. And so when you're buying from a third party, they're not always going to get your product name exactly right. Or, there will be like, they'll call it two different products, but it's really the same thing because it has a little bit different name or description or whatever. And so, getting those to match and kind of consolidating, combining that so that you can have better, data analysis. But yeah, that's an area of kind of continued kind of development as I look to add to my skills. And definitely, I'm very steeped in like the Microsoft world for all this kind of stuff, SQL, Power BI, Excel, but there's a whole open source side to it all too, that I really want to get more experience with. So that's kind of another area I look to be kind of expanding as I go. I've got some Python books I've started to learn a little bit, and D3 is maybe another example of the front end visualization suite. That's JavaScript framework. But to do visualizations on the web just with an open source package instead of using, Power BI or Tableau is, another kind of common one, which I have a little bit of experience with, not a ton, but it's a pretty good application. But yeah, that's kind of my focus these days of skilling up a little bit, finding that next gig, and just always kind of looking to grow. Eventually I want to be like an entrepreneur and have my own company, doing this kind of stuff. But for right now, just kind of looking for that day job, to eventually kind of grow that on the side eventually. But, cause I do some other stuff in addition to the data work. I do some like graphic design, web, video editing, web front end design and back end too. I mean, I know like the database stuff, and I've played around a little bit like with PHP, MySQL, that kind of stuff. So, it's kind of all over the place and what I like to do, but I'm just a lover of knowledge, and just always, looking to kind of teach myself stuff. And it's so easy these days to find tutorials out there, and especially all this tech stuff. Like somebody learns how to make a website, and it's like the first thing they do is make a tutorial to teach other people how to do that, So with these kind of skills, there's so much out there available to just teach yourself. So that's what I've been up to, work-wise.
So, most of your career, you have done marketing and as a consultant. Now you are into data analysis.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of started with data and then got into marketing and then kind of back to data, I guess is how. But yeah, and definitely it's been a kind of a heavy focus on analytics for marketing, but also analytics across the board. So supply chain or business product, kind of anything that data touches, kind of has been, in my view. But yeah, heavy focus on marketing and, so.
So how much do you know about data?
I mean, I'm pretty good with spreadsheets and then with SQL, like writing SQL code, mostly for analytics, but a little bit like for ETL, data engineering, data warehousing kind of stuff. For me, either like with SQL stored procedures or, integration services. That's for the Microsoft data stack is the ETL tool. That's, yeah, just moving data, pulling it from different sources, whether it's a flat file or a spreadsheet or often, another server or a data cube. I've gotten into, like, I'm pretty good at SQL. I've know a little bit of MDX, which is the multidimensional query language for cubes, and just enough really to kind of pull the data that I need. It's not an area that I'm an expert in, but yeah, kind of just that basic of like, just give me a big data feed and then I'll kind of take it from there, bring it into a regular SQL table, and then I can do my analytics on that. I've gotten into a little bit of reporting services too, and then quite a bit of Power BI. It's kind of seems like it's very common these days. There's a lot of people building Power BI dashboards in businesses. There's so much data out there that people are able to capture these days, but they're still kind of in the early days of like getting good reporting on that and getting the visibility of that and then sharing it out within a company. And, but yeah, those are kind of my top skills: Excel, SQL, Power BI, SSIS, the integration services. I have not done like building my own cubes with analysis services, but that's certainly kind of like a next area that I'd love to add. I've gotten into a little bit, like I have some of the front end open source stuff, like I mentioned, PHP and MySQL, but I really want to learn the Microsoft side of that too, with ASP.NET, and doing a front end for, a data application, or being able to kind of integrate that with the different, have it integrated with reporting services or Power BI, that kind of stuff. So, the ASP.NET is, again, an area I've studied into a little bit, kind of scratched the surface of learning that, but, really want to kind of add that skill to the set. And then, like I mentioned, then you kind of get into more of the open source stuff. And, that's an area that just I want to learn. Again, Python, D3, explore some of the other ETL solutions out there too. Like we were using Talend at Sound United, and that seemed like a pretty good tool. So I guess that's kind of what I know in the data world. Yeah.
And I can see you have worked in different companies which works differently. So what you have learned?
Yeah. Amazon and Microsoft are very different, but also have a lot of similarities. But pretty different cultures. I would say the Amazon culture, I've never been anywhere where the people really took seriously the mission of the company. And they have this thing called the leadership principles, which is a list of just kind of traits of working, to kind of become guideposts in kind of doing your work. And as an example, like dive deep is one of them. And so, the idea with that is, diving deep into the details of a situation, obviously kind of like on the surface of it, but it also refers to one of the things they say, that we don't say, this isn't my job. You hear a lot at work, somebody will say, well, I wasn't hired to do this, or somebody thinks they're kind of maybe above a certain task. It's like, I'm supposed to be managing. I'm not going to work with spreadsheets, and a lot of times, delegation is important, but that leadership principle of dive deep, in addition to referring to kind of the details aspect of it, it does kind of refer to, like, sometimes even like a manager might need to roll up their sleeves and do some kind of menial task, and just because that's what's needed. Especially at like a company like Amazon is very flat as far as the hierarchy. It has grown, so it's not quite as much that way, but even still, it's very kind of streamlined. Like there aren't a lot of layers, management layers, in the company. And so your ability to do something, if you have something that you really want to do in the company and you're willing to kind of drive it, Obviously, you kind of got to get the right support and all that, but um, especially though, and this is one of the main differences between the two companies is money and funding to do things is a lot harder to come by at Amazon. Microsoft it's a higher margin business, and there's just kind of more money going around. I mean, even that when I was at AWS, I was actually there spending Microsoft money. Like our budget was coming from Microsoft, and the AWS had their own, their own kind of funding, but it's just an example of kind of some of the differences. And then at Microsoft, maybe you have a little bit more of a varied culture, I would say, kind of from group to group. But generally, the people are pretty smart there and knowledgeable, and it's fairly engineering driven organization. I'd say both of them are kind of fairly engineering driven. I think Microsoft is getting a little more kind of marketing driven, especially their evolution over the recent years. And that's been something really interesting to watch happen. When I was at Microsoft, just started in like '05 and left in 11. So, we're talking 10, 15 years ago now. It's been really interesting to see the evolution of that company under Satya taking over and some of the changes they've made there. So, but yeah, that's maybe kind of in a nutshell those working at those two companies.
And how you are able to do, if I observe your last three jobs, one is different from other. How you are able to adapt to the new one and able to be successful in anything that you are doing new.
Yeah, well, luckily there's always been spreadsheets involved, and so I'm able to kind of lean on that biggest strength I have. And there's always been data involved, and there's always been opportunity to improve the quality of that data or the quality of processes. And so that's kind of the common thread, even if they're, a little bit kind of varied in the roles. Those are two constants. Just understanding kind of how businesses function of kind of the different groups and some of the types of data they're interested in. It's like finance wants to talk about margin, especially, like when you're a public company, when you have a stock price, it's like they report their margins to the street, and so anything that affects that percentage really, gets a lot of focus. But maybe if it's like supply chain, they're more interested in run rates and inventory levels, and they care about cost too. That's kind of their way of looking at margin is the opposite, the inverse of just the cost. But then if it's marketing, maybe, they're interested in impressions or looking at funnel analytics of customers going through the purchase process and looking for like, you're always like, where's the funnel breaking down? We know we gave 2 million impressions on this campaign and we got, 1,000 conversions, and there's all those steps of the funnel process of awareness, consideration, and into purchase that, where you can do analysis of those different steps to say, what do we got to do to get more people across the line? So, there's just different kind of common and important fields that different role types are interested in when it comes to the data. Maybe another example is like for the business team, they're interested in a forecast of the business, like a long range forecast plan. Looking at like maybe the TAM is one of the acronyms that you hear talked about, which is total addressable market. So we're in this market. What's the total that we're kind of like shooting for? And then what's our percentage of that? And then obviously, trying to drive increases of that. And so yeah, that's how I'm able to kind of do these, slightly different types of roles, but they all kind of have those things in common. And whether it's a direct to consumer business or a B2B type of business, there's going to be differences in, it's like with B2B, that's like the cloud stuff I was doing. You're not going to get somebody to like show up to the website and sign up for, hey, let's add my company to this. It's going to be more of a longer process of maybe they need to study, they need to look at like cost of ownership type stuff, or, how much would this cost and how much could it save us and what are the technical aspects? It's not like somebody buying a set of headphones or a keyboard on a website, and so different types of purchasing, but so even if they're different, they each have their kind of process that they go through, their purchase process, and different types of content that might work for that. If you're selling DTC on a website, maybe you want to do paid search and display, good SEO, that kind of stuff, to get people to your site. Whereas like on B2B, maybe that's more like webinars or white papers or doing custom research, like, hey, we studied this company who used our product and they were able to do this with it. Customer references, where, like there's some kind of famous companies that are running on AWS, for example, like Netflix is maybe one of the more common ones. Airbnb, Pinterest, I think is still on there. And just all sorts of companies beyond that. And so that's some good content to create, which is, you do a customer reference, you tell their story, and maybe you do a video or a written version of it. You can but anyway, that's good content for kind of B2B marketing, those types of things. So yeah, it's just, there's always kind of a commonality of different things that you find across those different areas. And so like I say, there's always some spreadsheet floating around, that's related to that, and some process that, it's like, feels like it should be easier. This kind of manual work you're doing, it should be easier. And that's kind of my specialty, of like finding the way to get the computer to do that for you and free people up to have like higher value add things, or alerts. It's like, let's just keep an eye on this data and get an alert when something goes beyond a certain threshold, or that kind of thing. So yeah, that's.
Can you, as a data analyst and as a person who is into marketing for a long time into different businesses, so as a data analyst, as a person who is into marketing, can you understand anything which is related to data analysis and which is related to marketing in any business?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of the stuff is fairly common. I mean, within marketing, there's kind of a few sets of things that you would want to do that I think most companies would want to do. Like I mentioned, like, what's the size of my market that I'm going for, whether it's B2B or DTC or whatever it is. What's our share of that market? And then maybe what are some of the competitors who has other share that we're looking to go for? Everybody's going to have kind of those basic questions, those basic business questions they want to answer with data. And then along the same lines, there's some kind of purchase process funnel that happens. There's a set of people that would be potential customers, and first they don't know anything about the product at all. Then you have awareness. They know about the product or the company. consider it, they're thinking about doing it, then maybe they evaluation and then they make that purchase, However they're buying, you kind of have those steps that take place. Now, for a lot of customers, they might just like jump right to, do all the first, like find out about something and want to buy it right away. Sometimes those will go really fast, but other times people will kind of spend some time in those different steps. And so that's where you can use data to see where people are and how can I move them along and get people to buy, whatever I'm trying to sell. And even for existing customers, you have this idea of churn, customers coming and going. And maybe there's ways you can study how current customers are using a product to inform new features you should add to it. Or even just, hey, we need to add better documentation onto our website. Like that was a lot of stuff at AWS. That was a big part of it because Microsoft licensing is complicated. There's a lot of different ways you can license their software. And there's different rules around running that software on a public cloud. And there's different ways you can buy that cloud that might change the way those licensing rules work. And so that was one of the things we did. It's really kind of boring to talk about, but just really detailed FAQ on the website about, hey, how can you do this, and detailed documentation of how you can do this. And, that's just an example of where, that might start with some kind of funnel analytics of looking at your customers that have purchased the product. How are they using it, or what are they asking questions about? That was one of the data sets we worked with at AWS was I was able to see like the full text of help calls. So somebody calls and asks a question, or, they send an email, however they ask, I'm trying to do this, or this is broken, or this isn't working, or, all that kind of stuff. And so I did like keyword analysis on that to see what are the common things that people are, trouble people are running into, and then how can we address that with our content? Hey, we need a white paper about this thing, so just some examples of how you can use data in a business. And yeah, I mean, long-winded way to kind of answer your question. I do think that pretty much any company, is looking at those things, and, to varying degrees, maybe is like actually kind of taking advantage of what they can do there. There's lots of smart people out there kind of already trying to do this stuff. But yeah, I do feel confident that, my skills are kind of valuable there. Almost kind of anywhere, I like to think. But, there's varying degrees of support and, things you want to understand going into a role, maybe of like where did that resource come from? So just kind of back on my most recent role at Sound United, something that in retrospect I feel like was maybe a key factor in kind of how that ended up the way it ended up was that team, the head for my job had come from another team. There was another team that was like, hey, we want you guys to have better data management, better data quality. Here's a head that we have that we'll give to you guys. You hire somebody to do that. And it can be a good way for, to find an opportunity, but something that now in retrospect, I realize it's kind of like I didn't necessarily have all the kind of support and buy-in on my own team that I really would have needed to understand the value of that role and how it could be applied there. But, it's okay. You live and learn. I got some good experience. Like I said, learning the kind of formalized data management, discipline, as well as like my Power BI, continue to practice getting better at Power BI. Cause I wouldn't call myself an expert. Like I would call myself an Excel expert, maybe SQL too, just for analytical stuff, not so much for transactional SQL, but like analytical SQL or basic ETL, data warehousing, data mart kind of stuff. But for Power BI, I'm a little newer, and so that was one of my bigger focuses in this most recent role was beefing up that Power BI skill set. But continue to use like VBA and Excel and do a lot of spreadsheets and get to know some of the new features. Excel is always making updates. Like they have their new X lookup formula. Kind of the traditional was they had what's called V lookup has kind of been the older formula, but now they've got this updated one, and it's kind of more powerful and more flexible, as well as a good set of different functions for like dealing with a matrix of cells as kind of like a data table, data frame kind of an idea. So, just again, continuing to kind of get better at Excel, learning the Power BI, got into some MDX, furthered my MDX skills a little bit, and a little bit of DAX. So DAX is like the Power BI language. It's kind of a cross between like SQL and Excel formulas, I would say. But it's just another language that you use within Power BI to like create a new column, or to do filters, have like custom filtered data sets or custom columns, custom dimensions, that kind of thing. So those were all kind of areas that I focused on in this role, as well as, this was the first time I had been on an IT team. I've interacted with IT and dev teams and engineers in my various roles, but was never on the team proper. And so that was good to get some experience with kind of the project management aspect of that, of doing sprints and tickets, so that was some good experience. Again, something that wasn't totally new to me, but my experience before had been I was the one creating the tickets, not the one, doing the tickets. I was doing kind of project management, marketing, and like, hey, we need this web page or this graphic or this content or this budget, whatever it would be. I was kind of more delegating, project managing that. So this was the first time to kind of be doing directly like IT work and being on the IT team. So that was good experience, and just kind of another little piece of variety to add to my set of different things that I've done and know how to do, and should serve me well in whatever role I go. There's always a project management aspect to anything, even like stuff we do in our daily life, non-working life, so yeah.
And tell me, you as a senior BI analyst.
Pardon?
Tell me, you as a senior BI analyst.
To talk about being a senior BI analyst?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what a BI analyst might spend a lot of their time doing is creating reports that people can look at, working with data engineering to get the right data that they need. At times I've kind of been all of that in one, where it's like you're doing the data engineering, you're building a data warehouse, data mart, and then you're doing the reporting on it as well. So kind of those different pieces. But yeah, you might be developing reports, you might be analyzing data, either writing SQLs to look at that data to learn some understanding about a variety of things. The business a lot of times will have their own questions already of, how's this product doing, or how are we doing in this region, that kind of thing. And so you might be developing reports that people can consume, and then they might ask questions about that. And, you'll probably service some of these various different roles that I mentioned, like somebody in finance wants to look at, they've got their month-end close that they're looking at. And like I said, the margin rate is really important to them, and drivers of some of those different things. Or if it's supply chain, they want to see, run rate and inventory. And again, marketing, might want to see campaign impressions and clicks and rates and, maybe different keywords, that kind of thing. So whoever you're talking to, you might have kind of different sets of data that they want to learn about. And so, yeah, BI analyst would be developing those reports, maybe sharing them, walking through, doing tutorials of, hey, here's what these different reports show, and, making sure they answer the business questions they have. And if they have more business questions, either you might do, like, a lot of times it just ends up being ad hoc analysis where you're just looking at the data to answer a question that they have. And you maybe have a pivot table in Excel, or just writing SQL code to get to those answers and then share those. And then maybe if it's ad hoc, it's kind of like a one-time thing. Maybe, they're doing it for their annual planning. But maybe it's something where they want that every week or every month or every hour, like one of my Microsoft consulting roles was at Bing. And so, that's generating data all the time, and so you might have you're refreshing stuff more often. You want to have your reports live all the time, and refreshing maybe multiple times a day, or even like a live connection. There's usually some kind of latency, like an hour or so, but it just kind of depends on what the product is that can define that cadence. They talk about rhythm of the business, the cadence of different reporting, whether it's hourly, instant, or weekly, or monthly, or quarterly. Especially in a public company, there's a big focus on like the quarter, because every quarter they have to report to Wall Street. And so that can be, something that there's a big focus around. And yeah, a BI analyst, again, you might look at internal data. You might look at external data as well. Like I mentioned, some of the kind of market data where you can purchase stats about how, the whole market landscape is doing, not just your products, but the competition. And, there's reporting that you can do out of that, mainly market share and then market size and the trend of that market. Like, are we is the whole market growing or shrinking? And, a lot of times businesses want to, obviously you kind of are chasing growth, always. And so maybe there's analysis that can tell you where is the growth, maybe if a market is up 5%, but it's all being driven by like the $40 to $50 range of a particular product, that segment is growing, by more than that. That's driving the growth. Or maybe a particular feature like Bluetooth, for mice as an example, just because that was one of my areas. But, just could be anything, any product feature that is driving growth in the marketplace. And so a BI analyst has to look at that data, and, you're always kind of trying to distill data down into information, knowledge, wisdom, get to like a wisdom level, where I think of that as like you're forecasting, you're creating a forward-looking view of like, here's where the market's going to go based on trends that we see. And so those are all things that a BI business analyst might do. Looking at the balance sheet, seeing how the balance sheet is doing. And then there's just always, if you put a finance person in front of a balance sheet, they will ask questions. They'll come up with, why is this like this? What's driving this? So just answering those questions and Sometimes it's a one-time answer. Sometimes it's like, well, we need to always know this. We need to always know where this is at. So in those cases, you might build a refreshable report or, have something delivered, send an email report every week or every month or every quarter or whatever to, the right audience. And again, they will always ask questions that are relevant to their area. And so that's what I always kind of rely on, to kind of guide my way in these different roles. Or, another example is goal setting. You might set a goal, you set a forecast for next year. You say, hey, the market's going to grow 5%. And they say, well, we want to outpace that growth and take some share. We're going to try to grow 10%. So, an analyst might then say, okay, I need to translate that into what would it take to get to that? What would you have to grow of product XYZ in order to achieve that? Or do we need a new product? Is there a segment we're not addressing? And then, sometimes some areas where you might use data to decide, well, how much are we going to charge for that product? How much is it going to cost to develop it? Where's kind of our break even point? Might do some data analytics around that when, internally they'll pitch a product and they'll say, hey, we want to create this. It's going to cost us $1 million to make this new widget. But we think we can sell $5 million of it. So, in the first 6 months, we'll make our money back and then it'll be profit after that, very kind of simplified version. But there's a lot of opportunity to bring analytics and data intelligence to have informed kind of answers around some of those basic questions of like a market opportunity proposal for an idea. And so, yeah, goal setting of like market share, or for an individual product, like, hey, we're going to launch this product and we think it can take 10%, 20% of the market. And then, from more of a supply chain perspective, let's say you approve that product. Hey, we're going to do this. We're going to build it based on the volume that we expect for it to sell. That run rate will determine like how many factory lines you're going to build in China to build that product. I mean, maybe you could, manufacturing could happen anywhere, but a lot of it comes out of China. And so, based on like how much you think you're going to sell of that, that's going to determine those lines are going to build, and that's going to determine the cost that goes into it. And so, if it's something that you're going to sell a lot of, you need to ramp that up really quickly. And then you need to determine, hey, if we need to put this product in stores, how many do we need by when? And then to be able to launch with these stores. And I always use the Best Buy example, but there's the office supply stores and other kind of retailers that for these products we're working, or, some business like CDW is another, kind of more of a B2B type business that would sell these types of products. Or like with the audio stuff, there's a whole kind of ecosystem of like audio stores. And so anyway, when you're using data, you use that to determine, hey, we need 10,000 units in 2 months if we want to be on the shelf in Best Buy. And so you're planning these things out a year in advance. You're like, hey, we're going to make this. Do you think you would want it? If so, how much, that kind of thing. So that's where the data with the forecasting, you bring in the intelligence to say, make this many, have these many lines in the factory, and, plan for this kind of scale. Obviously, then you're watching it once it really starts happening, and then you're seeing, hey, were we right? Were our assumptions right? And then doing any kind of tuning there that you might need to do based on, as you see kind of how the reality plays out. And, that's an area that, right now, a lot of people are talking about AI, chat GPT and all that stuff. And that's definitely an area where, you could see an opportunity to apply AI to kind of use that data to make smarter decisions, or to make adjustments to say like, hey, if you had this factor at this level instead of this level, your forecast would have been closer. And so maybe you make that tuning, that kind of thing. I think there's a lot of opportunity for, just to kind of advance things there. So yeah, that's stuff that a BI analyst might do. they might use different tools. Not everybody's using Excel, although it's very common. Not everybody's using SQL Server. They might have a different database. They might be using Oracle or MySQL. And then there's a whole ecosystem of different ETL tools as well as visualization tools. Like Informatica is another example. I mentioned Tableau, or Oracle has OBIEE. I forget what the acronym stands for. It's Oracle BI, Business Intelligence something. But I did use that a bit. That was, for part of the time at Amazon, that was our reporting front end was OBIE. Just there's a whole variety of, a whole kind of side of that marketplace. A lot of products out there of different things. To use Google Data Studio and Looker are another couple of examples. And then all these clouds, there's a whole suites of products for analytics and data storing and visualizations within the clouds, Google and Amazon and Microsoft, of course, all have their products there. And so, or like with Google in particular, there's all the search stuff, the Google advertising stuff for doing paid search or SEO type stuff. And so, just a lot out there. And that's something, like that example in particular is another area where it's like, I've done it indirectly. I worked with folks that were doing that as their whole job, and I was kind of delegating that part of it to get, or sometimes we'd even outsource to an agency, like do a paid search campaign through an agency. So an area where I'd love to get like direct firsthand experience, doing SEO, SEM type stuff. So not exactly in this, like the same as the BI analyst, but it's always kind of relevant, it's kind of a piece of the marketing set, I guess. But of course, it's data. There's data involved with it. So it's kind of some overlap.
So at last, what do you say about your work to my audience?
I would say, follow your passion. If in pretty much any area, anything that you're interested in, if you like music or you like cooking or going to different restaurants or art or film or, anything like that, there's data involved. And so if you have an interest in that kind of stuff, and you want to learn this kind of stuff, that's what I'd say is like, pick an area that you're already interested in and then do something with that. Where it's like, I want to organize my recipes, or I want to organize my music collection, or, that kind of thing. There's always room. There's always a spreadsheet you can make, or even like planning a vacation, or budget. Everybody has to manage their money to some degree, and so budgeting is kind of like, if you can't think of anything to do, do that. And, everybody's, like your bank accounts, you can do an export of the data, or now these days, a lot of times you can connect directly to that, like through a spreadsheet or different apps. And so, just get your hands on some data and just kind of ask yourself, what are the questions that you want to ask about that? Like, again, like maybe if it's personal finances, you want to save up to get something that you want to buy, or a trip that you want to take. And so, using a spreadsheet to kind of make that plan to do that, I think that's probably an area that almost anybody could do if they have an interest in this kind of stuff. YouTube obviously is a really great resource. There's some other sites out there. One that I've been looking at in particular is called Pluralsight. And it is a paid service, but they have 2 levels. But they look like they have some really good tutorials on there. So that's something that I'm signing up for to kind of further my skills. And, but yeah, there's all sorts of, other sites out there too, where you can find tutorials on different stuff. So yeah, find something that you're passionate about, and if you're interested in kind of learning these things, or even just, start with ask Chat GPT you get a pretty good rundown on these kinds of things too, so that's, I guess, what I would say to your audience, or, again, like, not just kind of doing stuff in your own life, but in any job is going to have data involved in it, or a process that, maybe could have some better steps to it, or some looking for opportunity where people are waiting for something that they shouldn't have to wait for. And so if there's a way to like get that, for there to be a report for that, or whatever, or even just like documenting a process, just writing it down, doing like a data flow diagram, which you can do in any variety of different tools. Of course, there's Microsoft Visio is kind of their main one, but you can do it in PowerPoint. You can do it in, like Figma or some of the other products that are out there. And but yeah, just documenting a process a lot of times that shows you opportunities for improvements you can make, and talking to the folks that are involved in a collaboration and looking for those kind of breakpoints where it's like, hey, I'm always waiting for this, or I need to know this, but I have to go find the answer or analyze it to find it. So I just kind of see all around me these opportunities to, apply these data tools that we have to our working life, or even, outside of that. Or, like if anybody's stuck somewhere in particular and they want to ask me a specific question, I've shared out some of my contact info through this video. So, certainly I'm willing to, feel free anybody to reach out and ask, or like if they have a particular, situation they're in, or a spreadsheet they're using that they just feel like could be better, or a process they feel like could be better, feel free to reach out, or to just, folks want to connect on LinkedIn or Instagram, that kind of stuff. I don't post a lot to Instagram. It's more just kind of random, but, that's, I think, what I'd say to your audience. And just thanks for listening to me drone on about my daily, my work life. And, it's just kind of like you get into something and you kind of plug away, and then you look around and, decades have gone by. So, but, I've been fortunate, I think, to be able to have some of these opportunities. And I guess one last thing I would add too, as I talk about that, one thing to share too is like, don't feel like you necessarily have to study exactly the thing that you end up doing in life. So when I was in school, I started as a math major, and then I was a graphic design art major for a year, and then I ended up in literature. Actually, comparative literature was what I studied, and it was the kind of cinema studies track of that. And so I was studying film analysis and history and literary analysis. Now, it was very analytical, so I like to say that analytical kind of background has helped me in my job, but I didn't study business, or economics, or even, this data stuff. I really all picked up just kind of on my own, and just really started again with the spreadsheets and just kind of went from there, getting into the SQL and the VBA and all that. But if you're really passionate about something and pursuing something, especially if it's kind of a tech thing, because again, there's so much material out there to learn. Don't be afraid to pursue that just because it's like, oh, I didn't study that in school. I think the curiosity and the passion is what will drive you. But you do have to want to learn. Some people just don't want to learn. This like you do have to have that interest. So that's again where the starting point is always find something that you really are interested in and, kind of take it from there.
And at last, what is your observation about my work?
I have to admit, I have not watched any of your videos. I just saw kind of what it was that you're doing of talking to different people about what they do. So I love the idea. But so I will try to get a chance to check out some of the other videos. But yeah, and generally I would just say I think it's great, to have these kind of conversations and for people to kind of share what they know. And so, yeah, just keep at it. I appreciate you were persistent too. I think we first connected a couple years ago, right when I had first gotten this job. And then I ended up moving. There was a relocation with this too. I moved from Seattle down to the San Diego area down the coast, and just ramping up on that new job and moving my whole life down here, was kind of a lot. So I hadn't been able to make the time to have this chat with you, but I appreciate your persistence in, you kind of came back and was like, hey, is this a good time now? And coincidentally, it was a good time. Now my free time, I have a little bit more free time right now. So yeah, I think I would just commend you on your persistence and patience too in waiting till it was a good time for me. So that's, I think, the main thing I would say. But I don't know a lot about, I know I saw on your LinkedIn, I think you mentioned like DevOps as one of your areas. So I would certainly say, that's a very good skill to have. There was really kind of became a hot topic, while I was at AWS, and something that we definitely focused a lot on, like reaching out to the DevOps community, because it's a lot of the folks that are really using these tools themselves. And so, they might, at a company, they might have a lot of influence on kind of what a company is going to use. And so, and just as a part of the evolution of these different roles, it's a very important area, and an area there's been a lot of progress in recent years of, applying the technology to doing those things and freeing up a developer to not have to worry about a server. They just, you get it all working and then just give them the address and they can run from there, that kind of thing of like, as these different areas evolve, you kind of carve out these different niche areas, and whether it's DevOps or data engineering, or, development, they all kind of become a bigger role of just themselves. Whereas in the past, maybe somebody would kind of do all the, like a developer would have to do their own operations themselves. But now, it's kind of its own discipline. So I definitely would say that's a valuable skill to have, and you should, continue to pursue that. And, I don't know what tools you use to do that. But, so-called kind of serverless computing, it's always kind of, to someone, especially someone that's worked there, serverless is kind of a funny term because, of course, there's still a server there. It's not serverless. Or like there's the kind of joke of like, the cloud isn't even the cloud. It's just somebody else's computer, and that really is true. But because they're distributed, you can do a lot more with them, and, you can kind of use a piece of a server instead of having to use the whole thing. And, There's some economies that come out of that. But yeah, keep up with DevOps, and I don't know what other kind of stuff you're interested in, but I definitely would encourage, continuing to do that.
And I'm a Amazon Web Services Cloud DevOps engineer right now. I'm
AWS.
doing that. So apart from that, I'm interviewing a lot of experts from different parts of the world and for into different roles. They can be architects or engineers or doctors, like not only technology people, also people from non-technical background. Also, I'm taking interviews and trying to ask them what they do and how they did it, how they solved their problems, and how they handled their projects and what they did, and like uh, asking them and trying to know it and trying to put it on my medium. So, how this experience talking with experts like you who are already in the industry for a long time, doing different roles and doing different jobs, and listening to you people with this knowledge, how this knowledge is going to helpful for me if I work in IT in coming days. It can be DevOps engineer or another role.
Cool. Yeah, that's great. I don't know. Have you gotten any like certifications? Um,
Uh,
the AWS, like they have a pretty good program, for education and certifications. I definitely, would encourage that if you're not already doing that. Um,
I have masters in software engineering, also bachelor's in computer science and engineering. But recently I have joined in DevOps engineering role. I have masters already in technology.
wow. Okay. That's impressive.
Yeah.
Um, what do you like? So what code was that, like Java, C++ kind of stuff, or what did you
I
learn?
do I do automation thing using Jenkins, Docker, Kubernetes, Terraform, Ansible. All these tools have been taught in my training, and I'm doing some projects using that, trying to deploy applications in servers, different types of applications, Angular, JS, Java, or .NET, whatever
Yeah.
applications that they give. I have to manage and maintain it on the AWS cloud
Okay.
servers. That's my
Yeah,
job.
I think that seems like that's a good spot, you know. Um, do you work with Chef at all? Do you know about the Chef tool?
No, that's
Okay,
not my
it's
thing.
I think it's like I think it's kind of an orchestration tool, but just a name I saw come up when we were talking about DevOps stuff. So
Okay,
I don't know, it's maybe something to
I
check
have to
into.
look at it.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and certainly, there's a good partner ecosystem within AWS. There's so many companies that their stuff runs on there. So it's a great way to get experience with different tools like that. And I know that's one that's on there that I think is DevOps related. So um, yeah, cool. Well, thanks for the time today and the conversation. And just one more thing to add, just something that sparked in what you were mentioning that I think is really valuable is talking to a non-technical audience, like being able to talk technical stuff to a non-technical audience is a pretty rare skill out there still. And so being able to, articulate something to someone that isn't going to understand the code, but to be able to kind of describe something that definitely is a very valuable skill to have too. So I think that's a good focus that you have in having that variety in your audience, because usually a lot of times your customer is going to be non-technical. Someone in a business, they just want an answer, or a customer, they just want an answer. They don't know how you're going to get to it, and that's up to us, to figure out. So definitely that variety, I think, is a valuable thing. So I wanted to highlight that in what you were mentioning, and something that really resonates with me too, that I've seen to be valuable. And being comfortable like making the analysis or making the report, but also being comfortable like putting on a slide and talking to it, in front of a group. I know a lot of us kind of data or code types. Maybe it's not our comfort zone all the time, but really, is a valuable thing. And definitely within that would say the value of practice. Practice your presentations. It always feels kind of awkward doing it, talking to an empty room, or, get a friend that's willing to hear it or whatever. That's very valuable too. Like if you able to take the data all the way of like, if I had to present this to the CEO and I had one slide and I had 5 minutes to talk to it, what would I tell them? And be able to prioritize, within that of like, what's the most important thing, and then down from there. And one kind of, I'm rambling a little bit, but I'll round it out with this, just to say one kind of trick that I would do in that work is I would talk about the 5 whys or layers of why. So if you look at a stat or a piece of data and you say, why is that what it is? And then you get that answer, and then you ask why again. Well, why is that? If you can go like 3 to 5 levels of answering that question, of just kind of a basic why question about whatever information it is, it can be really valuable to kind of bring out or prioritize the insights that you're finding within that data. So layers of why. And a lot of times, it's like a boss will kind of try to look smart in front of the group, is just asking a stumper kind of a question of like, oh, if I ask them something they can't answer, then, I win. And it's like, if you anticipate that and you're able to answer those basic why questions about something, or, if you can't, maybe don't show it, maybe, kind of understand that stuff until, when you're able to do that. So the 5 whys is a good kind of, good tip, I think.
And can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your permission?
Yeah, by all means, share away. I'll just say I haven't really, other than like the people closest in my life, I haven't told them I'm between jobs yet. So, surprise if anybody's finding out this way, anybody that, if anyone knows me. But there's a lot of that going around, as you've known, and, state of the economy and that stuff. So, definitely, not discouraged by any of that, and just kind of excited about the next chapter. So if anybody else, if someone's in the same kind of boat, just, maybe it's helpful to see even someone with a lot of experience and valuable skills, you can find yourself in that situation. And so, just make the most of it. And, I'm a big believer in just things happen the way they're meant to, and, just kind of trusting that. And so just kind of going with the flow, it is important. And, it's like a cheesy cliche, but, attitude really is everything, and I think if you approach it with a positive mindset and how am I going to make the most of this, and, take advantage of a chance to take a minute and rest, or, for me, it's like, oh, I can finally get back to working out again. It's like, it's always the struggle of like starting and stopping, exercise. I ride my bike and walk a good amount and stuff, but, so yeah, just taking advantage of a situation like this as an opportunity, and, be persistent. Don't be afraid to reach out and connect to folks, on LinkedIn and that kind of thing, or Twitter, can be a great way to kind of find opportunities out there. This job that I most recently had, I found it on LinkedIn. It was actually a recruiter that found me, luckily enough. But I've had other roles where I found it was, I found it on there too. So that's been good. Yeah, please share away. And
can I also put this video on my YouTube podcast website, internet, social media, everywhere with your permission?
yeah, now is it video podcast or is it audio too?
Both.
Both. Okay. Cool. Yeah, feel free. You've got my contact info.
Can you share it? Can you share it to my podcast listeners? Can you spell it?
Yeah, so probably the easiest way, I'm White Wyatt on Twitter, WHITE Wyatt, WYATT. Just because that's my name and my nickname, people kind of call me Wyatt because sometimes when I say my name, it sounds like that's what I say. But yeah, Colin White. I think it's Colin D White on LinkedIn and Insta Wyatt on Instagram. So yeah, anybody feel free. I think Colin D White on Facebook too. Anybody feel free to connect on any of those different sites, and just wish everybody the best of luck in finding jobs and learning skills, and um, thanks for listening, and thanks for the good conversation. So I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you today.
Thank you very much, Colin, again for your valuable time and sharing your experience and answering some of my questions.
My pleasure. Have a good evening.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Yeah, bye.
All right. Bye-bye.